Welcome, everyone. I'm Ashish Kaushal, CEO of Hire Talent, a diversity staffing firm, and co-founder of Consciously Unbiased. Today, our topic is the game is the same, but the rules have changed. The technology to manage distributed teams and remote workers and contingent workforce and beyond has existed well before the pandemic. But the ongoing global health crisis has helped normalize this way of working. We have some amazing guests here today to discuss the mindset shift leaders need to make to adapt to the pandemic economy, how to find opportunities and advantages despite the labor shortages, and much more. Let's start off by introducing our guests. So today we have Corinne Selfor. She's Global Head of Consumer Products and Life Sciences at Pontoon Solutions. Doug Levy, CEO of Beeline. Bruce Martin, Global Head of Strategy at Allegis Global Solutions. Jason Ezrati, Chairman and Chief Data Scientist at Brightfield. And then Brian Salkowski, COO of Guidant Global. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm excited. I love that we do these every quarter. Can you each say who you are and a leadership lesson you learned during the summer of Delta?
Sure. I'm Karen Selfers. I learned that. Oh, I'm looking at the screen. Correct me. Ladies first, Karen.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Doug Levy. No,
sorry. I learned nothing.
No, Karen Selfers. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. As Ashish has shared, I'm with Pontoon Solutions. I lead a global division, a portfolio of MSP and RXO clients in the segments that you can read here on your screen. As you can tell from my accent, originally from Switzerland, but live in sunny Florida since the past 8 years and enjoy very much this space. A leadership lesson that I've learned this summer, I think we've all learned over the last 18 months is client proximity, although via technology, is even more important. So to just stay connected, camera on, I would say, and also with your teams, with your colleagues, is just fundamentally so important. Check in on a regular basis. I actually think it's made us more efficient to stay connected and closer, even though obviously in-person meetings are far better, more enjoyable. But just the efficiency of seeing each other a lot more and more often rather than having to hop on a plane is a great lesson.
Absolutely. Doug, you're next.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Doug Levy, CEO of Beeline. And, I think for me, the greatest awareness that I focused in on over the last year and a half is mental health. And I think it's obvious in the first several months of COVID, we did a lot of what you're saying, Karen, and a lot of touching base, et cetera. But it's interesting when I start to hear feedback around how people are doing. I think there's just this general COVID fatigue. And as I say, that the easy dog to kick is your job. And so we talk about the great resignation, and I've certainly seen more, or I should say, more examples of, let's say, less engagement than in the past. And I think it's important for us to understand that as we go through this, there's political divisiveness, et cetera. And so there's just a lot on everybody's minds and shoulders. And so we've got to be careful not to just say, the job's hard, because jobs are hard. But there is an element of mental health that I perhaps was not as clued into before. And I think we're just trying to do a better job talking about it, getting brave people to share their experiences so others feel enabled to do so, and help folks understand, like, it's cool. Like, we're all going through ups and downs. And so, I think everybody in this phone is a great person who leads by the heart. But for me, it was this notion of, mental health isn't something that's sometimes difficult just during COVID. It just helped me look at it and appreciate it more. And this is something that we'll take forward and hopefully show great sensitivity to moving forward.
Yeah. You know what? It's a balance, because I'll tell you, in the beginning, we kept doing Zoom calls, right? And I started missing the phone. And so I started saying, let's do phone calls, because it ties you to your desk. And so my team was like, can we just do a conference call instead of doing a Zoom call, so that we can actually walk around and get exercise while we're talking? So it's a balance of the two. Jason, I'd love to hear yours.
Sure. Hi, Jason Ezrati. But I think just to that point, Ash, if people are walking, they're less likely to be checking emails, because that's part of the problem, is how much people pretend they can timeshare. With Brightfield, I spend a lot of my day-to-day in data. So I think for me, the joy of that past time period of this summer has been just questioning all assumptions. What's the cost of an hourly rate of a nurse is a new answer compared to previously, similar to things like wood. So in a world where everything is changed and so disrupted, there's no assumption that you can lean on, and everything has to be retested and re-questioned. And that's created some really great opportunities and some really scary risks for our clients and other businesses. And so that's where I've been having fun, is poking at all assumptions and seeing what new realities bear out.
Oh, absolutely. Great points. And Brian.
Is that me? So first I have to compliment you. I'm looking at the streaming banner at the bottom of the screen. I feel like I'm on cable news.
We're trying to get people to focus on the conversation and ask for jobs here.
So all good comments so far. I guess I would play a little bit off of Karen's opening comments, and thinking back over the last year. How are we connected with our teams? What creates attachment? And ultimately, attachment isn't about a desk or a physical office place, if that matters at all. And the need to get deeper with our teams. We talk professionally all the time, but showing more empathy, more emotional connection to the team. That's what creates attachment to one another, also to the company. I think it's been a bit of a revelation just how important those things are when you remove the other elements. So for me, it's been a bit of an epiphany to that regards.
Oh, absolutely. And Bruce, my friend.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, Bruce Morton, Head of Strategy for Allegis Global Solutions. And as you can guess by the title, my job is to see around the corner, look into the future, and build the solutions to deliver on those promises to our clients. I think, bizarrely, in the last 18 months, first, I've learned that my wife and I can actually maintain a relationship when we see each other 5 days a week. Previous 10 years, we only saw each other at weekends. So that's been interesting, but we've survived. But interestingly, I think we have more of a human connection now, because we are literally looking into people's homes, or in my case right now in a hotel in Nashville, but you're literally looking into people's lives. So that human connection now, I know far more about my colleagues now than I ever did before, which is really weird, because we're not actually getting that face to face necessarily. And when we arrived at this hotel last night, we got about 100 people in for an internal strategy meeting, and I didn't know that these people I hadn't met. And they're kind of, "Hey, bro, it's great to meet you." I'm like, "Hey, what do you mean meet me? We've known each other for 2 years." They're like, "No, this is the first time we met in person. I didn't realize you'd be so tall." And it's just like, what a weird world we're living in, right? But I think what but really interesting, and I guess more seriously, is that I've never known clients or prospects be more open to change. And I truly do believe that we don't have to have all the answers now, because nobody does. We just have to work in partnership with our clients just to get there. And I think that's okay. That didn't used to be okay. We were expected to turn up with 100% of the answers. And now it's like, well, we know a lot of this, but let's work the rest out between us. So I think that's been incredibly healthy, actually, for our relationships and our industry as a whole. Yeah,
I always say change spurs innovation. So it's an exciting time to be here. So speaking of that, since you have 100 people visiting you, my next question is around, many companies wanted workers back in the office this fall, but they're now delaying it until 2022 because of the new variant. Rather than viewing remote work as a disadvantage, how can we look at it as an opportunity for everybody? Bruce, you want to start with that one?
Are we? So it's raise your hands. I'll give this. Absolutely. So the obvious answer is that the physical limitations, those boundaries, don't matter in the same way. So whereas from a talent perspective, we were all, I shouldn't say we were all, many were quite limited in terms of their supply of talent, where they engage. And those tethers have come off or significantly loosened. So to be able to engage with anyone cross-country, regionally, et cetera, as a work partner, as a collaborator, as a teammate is truly game changing. So it's opened up the flow of talent. It's created connections that may never have existed in the past because they were physically limited. And that mindset, whether it's end of 21, 22, or whenever the office is open, I think that mindset will persist into the future. So that's obvious. I think we've been experiencing it, but it is a bit of a revolution because I've seen it in industries that have historically have been so tied to the desk that for the first time ever are really considering this, and they're benefiting from it because new blood means new ideas, fresh perspectives. You mentioned innovation and ideation. These are all outputs of having some more diversity within their workplace and a greater reach.
Absolutely. And you can get the best talent available instead of the best talent available locally, right? And then you also get the opportunity of, the fact is, like, I save 2 hours a day not commuting. So I'm putting that into work, right? And so every employee is working harder because they have more time, I think. Karen, you're going to say? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I absolutely I see this really as an opportunity. And I mean, we've done a lot of research also and surveys within the wider Adecco group, and clearly workers want to maintain this hybrid model past the pandemic. So something like 50-50 hybrid in office. And I definitely fully agree. I think it's opened up our ability to have much more diverse teams from different angles of the world, and proximity and where you sit has become so much less relevant. And that's a great opportunity, like, whereas before you had certain companies absolutely make you have certain people in a certain place, that's become irrelevant to a large degree. And I see that as an opportunity.
Absolutely.
No, I'll add on to my earlier comments, just thinking about this. These are more practical considerations, but as we think about it as an advantage of remote work, companies completely rethinking their physical footprint, how much is needed. There's efficiencies and cost savings coming off of that. From a productivity in the workplace perspective, both internally and amongst our clientele, I've seen a massive investment in digital assets, which transforms our ability to work remotely, makes us more efficient, improves the quality of the technical solutions and tools within our reach. So those are all byproducts of that remote working, but they have real benefits to the organization, both from a cost, quality, and productivity.
So do you guys see like a change in how we measure performance from how long you've sat at your desk versus what's a better measurement to perform? Like think about it. Right now, we basically track everything by timesheets and how many hours have you worked. Do you see a shift over the long term of that changing into some sort of performance or productivity type of measurement?
Yeah, I'll take that one first, Ash. I think that it's interesting because I think that trend had started to happen pre-COVID, where if you think about a lot of the staffing industry of getting into services. So that was already happening. This has just expedited it. So more and more organizations have really bought into the concept now of paying on outcome instead of paying on input. So it's literally just taking that same concept and bringing that to your employee base, exactly the same way as people want to pay on your services, not necessarily, I don't need 20 contractors. I just need you to get this piece of work done. So I think there's right now almost the missing link in the education that's needed is, as a manager that used to be called a hiring manager because you used to hire people, as now a leader of work instead of a leader of people, how do you write the scope? Where do you get that skill set to truly explain what it is you want as the outcome and how you're going to know whether it's the right result or not? You've got to measure that on milestones and success and so on. So a lot of our managers haven't had to do that in the past. They've relied on the supply base to do it. But I think we're seeing now early days of a trend of more and more work being paid on outcome. And I think that will help change the mindset of leaders internally to look at their employees the same as the way they look at their service providers. So it's almost like a reverse learning in a way from outside in.
Absolutely. Jason, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think these are all great points. I think there are certainly some organizations or certain facets that do run the other direction. The big banks here in Manhattan have said that they've suffered, 10 to 15% productivity loss from the way they see things. Concerned with younger, more entry level folks that typically come up through more hands-on training and the culture that's relied on. And so I don't know that everyone's just going to shift culture that dramatically overnight or can, but some of those are things in flight. But certainly to the 80+%, I think everything that we're saying here is not only true, but I think had already been in motion. Big companies, maybe they weren't having their folks staying home all the time, but they were traveling all the time. So many offices were hoteling offices. You didn't have a set desk with a picture of the family and everything. You were expected to be mobile. You were expected to be remote. You might spend 60+% of your time in a hotel room like Bruce, and all of these types of things. That was part and parcel, and especially for those that have specialized roles. So the more technically specialized your team is in any discipline, whether it's IT, legal, whatever, the more likely you're going to be leveraging people that are not necessarily going to be in the same city that's famous for one thing. So I think this has all been stuff that we're just getting better at. Maybe the idea of more of us getting used to it more quickly, more broadly. And I guess my final comment would be, I think it's really the impact to the family unit that's been what's most different from these other trends of how division of labor takes place at home, especially when the kids are not necessarily predictably in school and other activities. That's where I think we still have some stuff we're sorting out. And unfortunately, I think that's had a disproportionate impact to women. You would think that it would force men to be more into the participatory role, but I don't think that's been the case and has had some workforce implications.
Jason, I think you bring up a really interesting point. Family, I agree with you 100%. That was one of my key lessons as well, especially just the empathy for the working moms. And of course, some dads.
I wasn't talking about the Levy household. Sorry, Doug.
Oh, never mind then. When I think of family, it also applies to the workplace, right? And so, look, there's no question we have to be more flexible. I think we have to meet people where they are. We already had a degree of this pre-COVID, but nothing to this extent. However, maybe I'm just old school, but there's no question in my mind that, productivity as we measure it with outcomes, et cetera, has increased because Ash can't drive too. I get that. However, there's also no question in my mind that culturally we're taking a hit. Trust and empathy we're taking a hit, because it's easier for me to be harsh in email or even in Zoom to some extent, but there's so much knowledge transfer that happens at the water cooler. And so, when I think about some people have a lot of kids, they need to go to the office to be able to be productive. So we've opened up for that. There's others that need to be home for those kids. There's people that are introverted and they do better in this environment. There's people like myself that, man, I got to be hugging you and feeling good. And then, or I'm kind of getting in a low spot. So I think the new model is going to be focused a bit more on, first of all, can you be productive? I mean, it's still imperative. Can you do your work from remotely? And if so, what works well for you? So I think I read something that 70% of whatever the survey from Harvard came out said, if you made me come back, I'd start looking for a job. Now, there's a difference between looking and going, but that's still not the level of engagement we're looking for. So without doubt in my mind, the new model is let's be more flexible. But I do feel as if we're jerking the car a little too much to the right with, hey, we've proven productivity and we've proven, and we have, but I don't think we've yet really analyzed the impact on the soft skill side and the cultural side, which I think is going to be substantial.
Have you guys seen it affect retention?
What's that?
Say it again.
Affect their retention abilities because you're not bringing people in the office or not feeling that bond.
I'm sorry, I've missed the first part. Attention about what?
Retention.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our exit interviews, and for 20 years, I've been telling folks we're not the highest paid employer around, but there is something about culture and family and love that should be worth something. It's worth a lot to me, less to you, but put a value on that. And so in some of our exit interviews, like, look, I mean, we did have that. And now I'm sitting home coding and someone just offered me $7,000 more. Why wouldn't I? So it's an issue.
Yeah, it's a really good point you bring up, Doc. And I think especially also as we hire new people during the pandemic, right? And maybe also younger talent into the organization, to not have the ability to sort of assimilate them with the company culture, to build personal relationship and see them. What I observe is that it's so easy for them to pick up their jobs and take $7,000 more, like you say, and go elsewhere because they simply have never bonded. I find it's easier to retain those loyal employees
That's right.
that you've worked with for a long time, and you do have, I've met you in person, Doc, so it's harder for me to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But not for those that we have to have a different approach with those that entered during the pandemic, that are maybe a younger generation, even if they grew up in the digital age. Research shows that to check in on a regular basis is extremely important for them to feel as part of a team.
Yeah, you bring up
The
a great
reality is that what we just talked about as a positive earlier for employers' access to talent, the reverse is also true for those individuals. They're not limited by the employers in their backyard anymore. They can access opportunities anywhere. So there's two sides to every story, and of course, if the opportunity, part of it's compensation, part of it more and more I think has to do with the type of work. Is it challenging? Does it lead to additional opportunities, stimulate growth, whether it's professional or upward, etc.? All these things matter, and the amount of choices available especially to knowledge workers, has expanded to the same way employers' access to that talent has expanded.
No, absolutely. And I think you can't replace technology with the human connection. There's still that need for us to bond with each other and do it in person. Speaking of, there's so much talk about the Great Resignation. While there is an increase in job openings, the rate of employees quitting has also increased. And I think that has to do with some of the cultural things that we're not able to address. What's been the impact on contingent labor from your view?
Well, the first is just that we have seen an explosion in terms of opportunity. So when we talk about choice in the marketplace, it is at the highest level that I've seen, and I've been doing this a really long time. Really long time. You can't see the gray here really well, but it's there. In fact, as you would expect, we track number of new requirements, openings coming in. Just over the last 5 months, it's up 80%. In a 5-month time period. It has truly exploded. So for the contingent marketplace is just a microcosm of the larger marketplace. So there's more opportunities available, more flexibility around those opportunities, and in turn, it's playing through on your retention or your attrition rates, depending on which side you look at it.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the latest BLS numbers, that how are these jobs getting filled? There's perm jobs a 9% increase, contingent and 27% increase. So, generally speaking, how are people filling these holes when people are leaving? They're bringing in contractors. Now, of course, the big question is that the organization's decision because they want to do that to give them more flexibility and agility, or that's the only way you get the best talent is because they want to be contractors and consultants? So there's that whole dilemma we're going through at the moment. But yeah, I totally agree with Brian. I mean, I don't think any of us, even the most optimistic of us, would have predicted how quickly the contingent markets come back and continues to grow apace.
When I started in this business, when I started Brightfield, the idea that someone would prefer to stay in a contingent role versus an employee role was a very rare exception. And it would make sense. Well, they're so specialized, they can make so much more money. They're the ones in control and they feel it. And now to see that is being experienced with others. And so again, if you're willing to question all your assumptions, you don't have to buy into the framework of employment. I can make more money, and it seems like that's a flush market for me to do that. That's what the point of contingent is. And if I could quote this panel and you, Ash, that's what we felt would herald in the golden age of contingent. And so by Brian's measure, 80% so.
It's funny. 2.5 years ago, I was talking to someone about building a video. This is right after CWS, and it was, here's Brian. He's a full-time employee, and he's working at his desk Monday, and then Tuesday he's still working at his desk. Wednesday he's working at his desk. Thursday, same thing, and then Friday he's still at his desk. And then Corinne is a temp labor contingent worker, right? And she's on the side of a mountain in Switzerland on Monday, and then Tuesday she's at the beach, and then Wednesday she's at a ranch.
I want Corinne's job.
Man.
Karen wants Karen's job. You know, this is an interesting concept, though, that you bring up. I feel like we've done a mediocre job at best elevating the importance of the contingent worker, right? It's often seen as, well, that's just staff aug. And I think anytime you use just before people, that's a bad thing. And we talk a lot about being people first, and we think it's our obligation to put a spotlight on this really important group of workers, whether they're sweeping the streets or if they're interim CFOs. It kind of doesn't matter. And I love that the spotlight is now on this model. Bruce, I think it's a fair question, you know. I kind of get concerned about the economy, so I like the variability in my cost, or is it that's the only way I can hire folks because digital transformation is such a big deal and I can't find talent? Kind of doesn't matter. It's, for me, very encouraging that the world is starting to open your eyes. And when you even say the word contingent labor, like, oh yeah, you know, that's a great avenue for us to go find talent. And they're actually saying talent in the same sentence in the way we have for 20 years, but I'm not sure that the rest of the world has. So for me, that's a very exciting change.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just one add-on to that. I was chatting with someone yesterday about the space and where it's going and what are the things that might hold that back and make it slower. And it was remarkable to me that no one talked about the stigma of contingency, the stigma of being temp. That was always one of the top three things of why aren't we able to talk about this in an apples to apples kind of way. And so I don't know if it's gone from the conversation, but the idea that it's not in the top three, top five of the conversation, the negative stigma of being temp, I think is a very, very significant point.
I think, Jason, you know, to your point, I think this stems from the fact that there's such a shortage, and the value of this pool of labor has just increased dramatically, right? Like, I mean, the competition for this talent is real. I speak in particular for one of the segments I cover, consumer products, crazy, right? Like, I mean, we want way more of these workers that are willing to do the jobs, and we have to, it's very real that we've had to consistently increase salaries, find ways to attract them, offer them benefits, figure out childcare, I don't know, transportation and whatever have you, which maybe we talked about like that in Silicon Valley. We had to figure out ways to get people to attract to the tech jobs. Now we have to do the same thing in the, you know, manufacturing space, etc. So I like hearing that, because I mean, honestly, the value of the work that this pool of talent does is equally important, if not more.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. We also just branded it wrong. I mean, we call people permanent employees. No one's permanent.
Right.
I think that was part of that. It's part of the reason why it wasn't viewed the way it was. Many young workers worry that they're going to miss out on mentorship in the office community with an ongoing remote environment. How can companies keep their workers, and especially the young ones, feel like they're part of the community in a remote environment, beyond the things of doing like weekly Zoom calls or whatever you're doing? You know, what are some ideas that you guys have to sort of keep that talent engaged?
Yeah, one of the things we're doing, early days, what we're doing is to be very deliberate about creating projects that people can have a stretch assignment to be part of. So we're looking at our workforce and think, how do we be treating them differently if they were gig workers and they had a start, middle, and end? And that's why some gig workers want to be gig workers, because they like the idea of projects. So a lot of it's around projectizing work and thinking more about how can we build the most diverse group of people to solve this problem, instead of a few suits going away for a couple of days and coming back with the answers. So we've been very, very intentional about that. Some amazing results out of the gate pretty early on. I think the challenge is going to be sustainability, to be completely frank. But right now, everybody's excited about it, and it's definitely having an impact. And, you know, people that have been in the business, you know, only a few months are getting exposed to leadership in ways they wouldn't have done before, because they can actually have that impact. And I think, you know, the concept of a mirror board, where, you know, you take a group of young people and have the same conversation that the exec team's having and seeing what how the results differ. I think things like that used to be nice to have. I think those should be built into organization strategies now. So, and then the last piece before I pass it on is that I was reading this article last week, I think it's in Fortune Mag, about, are we getting to a dual society where there's those people that go in the office and get noticed and get promoted and become the leaders of the future, and those that work remote that don't? something else we need to be very, very conscious of.
Yeah.
And again, I think a number of organizations were struggling with that already before the pandemic. I mean, we have, clusters of offices plus our remote workers, and that was always something that was on our mind to, because that perception would definitely happen if you don't consciously work at it. So we completely agree.
Just a couple quick ads. There's a reason people talk about hybrid, and it is a thing. It's a thing for a reason. It doesn't necessarily mean a fixed schedule, but it means that strategically, when we talk about engaging those leaders of the future, that there are insertion points where teams are coming together in the office, and there's deliberate, whether it be a project, a planning event, or other type of event that they're strategically being brought into. I also think, second comment, that the enrollment process becomes much more important, and ensuring that we start building connections high and wide in the organization right at the onset. So 2 areas that we put particular focus on.
It's a great idea as well. Doug?
I mean, I'm probably doing the worst job of everybody based on what I just heard. So I feel a little insecure with this answer. Honestly, we haven't really done probably a great job on the mentorship side of things. I mean, going back to the productivity, we've been going really hard, like all you guys experienced. Our clients were very adaptable, and things didn't slow down a bit. So, I've personally done things reaching out to folks. And as I always say at Beeline, guys, I go to lunch alone a lot. So, don't think the CEO's got a whole bunch of people around. I'll go anybody, anytime. That's now kind of off the table. So I'm trying to make that more from a virtual perspective. I guess the only thing I would add, though, Ash, and you've helped us from this regard, is I do think in the end, it is really about connecting and relationships so that somebody's comfortable asking me to lunch or wanting to pick my brain, or I like reverse mentorships. Like there's a young lady who's a lesbian, and there's a lot I don't know about that, right? So we sort of created this. I'll share a little bit with you if you'll share a little bit with me. And going back to what I was going to say about you, Ash, like we created some events that would coalesce the organization. So when we did Gay Pride Month, for example, and after you did that great session with us, groups formed out of that so they can carry the torch. Same after the tragedy with George Floyd last year, right? So I think, it's less about mentorship. I guess my answer is less about mentorship, but getting people connected so that there's a level of comfort and they can take to the next level. I think the most important thing you teach the new people is values. And I can look across the pane here and without equivocating one bit, say every single one of these people espouses just great values and integrity in this industry. Partly why I love doing this with you so much. But, we can teach anybody skills. I can teach you how to write a paper or code. I can't, but somebody could, right? But we got to, what I'm saying? But from a mentorship perspective, I think it's important to help, especially the young, understand their guardrails and there's integrity and there's right and wrong ways of doing things. And you see a lot of examples of wrong, but that doesn't sustain itself over time. So I think that's really where we've been focusing more on our culture and our principles and showing that we walk our walk and making hard decisions on a financial basis that make a bunch of sense, that people go, huh. And I don't want to take up too much time, but our efforts have been more concerted in that regard as opposed to formal mentorships and job skill related.
Yeah, Doug, real quick, just to offer a practical suggestion, as you talk about lunch with the CEO and how that's hard right now. You could also add, not everyone, maybe great team member, but they may not be comfortable reaching out to the CEO. We since we all went remote, we introduced a program that's free, it's available, really affordable, called Coffee Roulette, and it matches up people for in-person, virtual, whatever, coffee across the organization. You can opt in. Someone's not comfortable. I'm doing it every other week and have met all kinds of people that we work with every day, but haven't really gotten to know. And it's been pretty cool. The uptake in the organization has been fantastic.
That's awesome. And do you do it, and do some of your colleagues and peers do it as well, or is it pretty much just some? Yeah.
No. This is across the entire organization. You'll get matched up at all levels.
That's really cool.
That's a great idea. Doug, I was going to say the one thing.
Brian, is there an app that you use for that?
Yeah, it's Snap. Yeah, Coffee Roulette.
It's called Tinder, I think, but I'm not sure. I've never done it.
I mean, like, I think one of the
Swiping
things
left on me. I don't know.
I'll always swipe right for you.
I think one of the things that actually does help your retention is that I think one of the things you did last year was highlight the fact that if a company that's a potential client doesn't align with your values, you're not going to work with them, right? And that's a hard thing to do because it's revenue, right? And you've made that clear, and so kind of shows a culture of the brand, and I think that builds a little bit of loyalty. But I definitely think if you had those Beeline parties again, we'd all be happy about that.
On the budget for next year, for sure.
The gymnastics you can do remotely, Doug.
Oh, I do that, but that doesn't seem to get the impact I'm looking for. Maybe it's just me.
So, Corinne, what do you see as the biggest opportunities or challenges for contingent workforce going into next year?
Ooh, yeah, big question. I think these challenges will remain very similar. I don't think the world's just going to go back to normal. And so, that the labor shortage we talked about earlier, I think that will continue. I think we will continue to have to fight for talent and be innovative in how we attract talent. In our case, on behalf of our companies. I think in general, we just have to remain extremely agile. I think, we talked about the well-being of people. We talked about mental health. We talked about work-life balance, all of these terms. I think we really need to continue to be innovative and agile in how we deal with the world of today and connect with people as much as we possibly can to know how they're doing on the ground. So I really don't see a lot changing, at least not in the near future here as we look into 2022.
Okay, great. Do you guys all agree?
Unfortunately, I do. I think it's an opportunity for massive change. And I believe, going back on what we said earlier about this focus on the variable workforce or the extended workforce, there's just this awesome opportunity for clients to actually take that spotlight to the C-suite and help them understand that this is a strategic initiative. This is not transactional, right? I'm looking at some amazing colleagues on the phone. Jason's got this amazing AI and data platform, and my other colleagues have this amazing service MSP platform that I don't think is being fully leveraged by fault of our own in our pricing mechanisms, but that's another conversation for another day. Then we've got the technology platforms, and in and of themselves, they're great, but this is an opportunity for people to start looking at a very transformational approach 3, 4, 5 years down the road and putting those pieces together and thinking about the challenges of tomorrow and actually setting forth a course that will get you there. This industry is so reticent to change. In my 20 years, everything is, how do I just fix this now? And we talk about all the great things that can happen, but we don't. And look, I think there's potentially an opportunity to put some fire under feet. And Karen, to your point, there clearly is an issue around talent, and those that embrace this approach and go hard and strategic and make a few mistakes, but get up and dust themselves off and they're going to kick everybody's tail. So I believe we're at a pivotal point. Do I actually believe we're going to see a sea change? I don't.
I would jump in and say, I think that exactly as Doug is saying, that there's those who have the attitude of don't waste a crisis, leverage this as the time to push it forward fast enough. But I think the forces that make it harder and slower, I think where Doug is leaning as well, is this industry was built to respond to short-term urgent need. And so if someone turns around and is like, yeah, great, thank you, with all that strategic vision and long-term building of things that can be more predictable, but right now I have to fill these 100 roles. And we're going to do something to do that. And so there's a react to the urgency. It's the ER version of the hospital, not the OR version of the hospital. So there has to be some part of that. I don't give up on the strategic portions of it. I just think that we have to be mindful of both in parallel. Otherwise, we're not going to satisfy either.
But don't you think that it's already, just the way we work? I mean, what I observe, and I actually think that is a great opportunity. Whereas before we had barriers to find talent somewhere, right? We are a lot more flexible. And this is a barrier that oftentimes companies would put up for us to say, okay, you have to source only in this region and I need this person locally there. Well, whereas now, they realize it's not possible. So actually, let's test. Whereas before, I had this one client in the Middle East. We had to only find people in the Middle East to work on project XY. Well, now we're allowed to actually source from across Europe. Great. Even though they tell us today, you're going to have to go back to the old way. I believe we can actually prove them differently because the results are going to be there. So I believe that's affording us a real change just through the whole pandemic that we're going through. And so those that embrace that, I think, to Doc's point, and stay innovative, I think this is a great time to maybe separate yourself from the competition.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we owe it to ourselves as an industry to do is we've got to stop seeing this as an HR issue or procurement issue, because that's what organizations do, and that's what we get frustrated about. So we can't be perpetuating that. And I do think the smarter organizations out there will create a brand new function, which is all about the workforce, that isn't a makeup of HR and procurement and a few other things. It's the most important thing. Obviously, we're biased because we're in the industry, but there isn't anything more important. And I think where I'm from, the UK, what they're going through now with the supermarket shelves being half empty, one is Brexit, the other is they can't get anybody to drive the stuff around the country. This is very real. This isn't some BS theory about war for talent. Walk into the supermarket. Why are there any lemons or tomatoes on the shelf? It's reality. So I think that if we can make sure that we shine a light on that, this is our moment to really help organizations make a change. And as your phrase, Jason, don't waste a disaster. How do we just all live through the biggest social span of all time? There'll be those that take advantage of it, and there'll be those that hark back to the old world that it ain't there. You can keep harking back for it, but it isn't there anymore.
Yeah. Do you think, given that companies are asking to be more strategic for their MSPs and their VMSs, the race to zero is kind of getting reversed, and so you'll start seeing the fees increase so they can actually hire the talent that's strategic that they want?
I'm seeing it in pockets, for sure. And I used to call this, I can't remember what it was, something like, contractor roulette, where it was, oh my gosh, it's $80 an hour. I said 79, 78. I'm like, stop. It's just the wrong mentality. Yeah, exactly. We actually used to have that about years ago, and it's start to open the aperture and look at total cost of ownership, as some firms are doing. And I'm sorry, this is my old conference soapbox, but I'll do it again. If you'll actually have the courage to ascribe ratings, innocuously, but ratings to talent, the machine can do some really great stuff. The MSP can do, we start to get a sense of what talent works where and at what price. So now we're starting to zoom out and say, oh gosh, that 5 rating cost me $4 more an hour and was worth every penny. I'll always hire people like that all day long because I know in the long run I do better.
Yeah.
So I think it's this was a sea change, but it's not. But certainly I know all of us on the phone are working with people like it. Don't worry so much about that. How do I get to that outcome that Bruce was talking about?
Yeah. It may sound a little bit trite, but it's the whole difference between price and cost, right? And there's a certain segment that will always focus on price, and it is what it is. You have to make a decision whether or not you want to operate in that space. But when we start talking about cost, now you're looking at ROI relative to expenditure, and are we generating a value greater than or equal to the price proposed? And I think that there was already a movement in that direction before the pandemic. Much like other things, we've seen an acceleration, and we've seen a greater importance on the advisory services that accompany what we do. There's a certain element of transactional management will always be there. It's important to ensure that it's done well, but the advisory has taken a greater spotlight. How do we navigate this? What options are available to us? Where do we need to be placing our bets 2, 3, 4 years from now? And frankly, there's a greater ROI and a greater premium on that advisory service, which I think we all have an opportunity to actualize. Not with the price taker crowd, but with that others that value that put a premium on long-term value.
Great point.
Ash, if this is any indication, that the clients that I spend my direct time with For the first time, there are more of them that are not talking about savings, but instead talking about what does it mean to be an employer of choice. And they're very different metrics. They're valued and measured very differently. They present differently. And so I think that's a reflection of the value of the contingent workforce to these companies. It has to be. And so with that, can the pricing go along with it? As long as the services do. And so I think this is everyone's opportunity to elevate the services, and the value perception should go along with it if we do it right.
And you know what I think we're missing, guys and gals, is, we used to talk a lot about risk mitigation, but nobody's had a nasty lawsuit yet. So I feel like it's taken the back seat. And I remember Jay from Fieldglass, was a conference one time, and he said something I thought was really, really smart. And somebody was talking about, well, help me understand this notion of, cost mitigation. He's like, well, think of the lawyers out there. You're not looking for cost savings from them, but there's an inherent value to have. Jason, some of us have been subjected to them, so that's probably poorly worded. But I do think, when we start thinking about what's going to come around the corner of the vaccinations, obviously there's things around diversity. People probably read the articles about the big tech and parity pay. There are some massive potential problems out there that I don't think are necessarily being valued proactively. Someone's going to get caught, and then everybody's going to come running to us and say, "Can you help us with this?" Say, "Yeah, of course. We've got mechanisms in place." But to the extent that we keep making it about a percentage price that goes down and down and down, our hands will be more tied.
No, absolutely. And I kind of talked about this a while ago in our report, that I do see a trend that for the first time in history, like you're seeing that contingent workforce is taking up 40 to 60% of your total workforce population. Right? And we normally managed it as a cost tool. And today I see like HR, D&I, procurement all sort of converging together and creating this really total talent solution. And the budgets are coming from different areas. And so for what we're doing with Consciously Unbiased, I'm seeing that price isn't an issue as much as it used to be, because procurement has other budgets to pull from, but their reputational risk is a bigger issue, right? So I already own co-employment. It's whether I like it or not, it's a risk I have, and there's nothing I can do to pretend to not have it. But the risk of treating people poorly is a larger reputational risk, which can affect your stock price way better than the employment risk you may have had. And I think companies are realizing that we have to start shifting which risk we're managing.
I totally agree with that. I think the conversation over the last couple of months has much more been around how can you fill all my roles, rather than what does it cost me, honestly. Attrition is a huge topic, right? Like how can we attract the best talent and mitigate the cost of attrition, which is a very, very real thing right now as well, right? But Doc, absolutely agree with you on risk mitigation. So it's my observation that with many of the global companies that we interact with, actually, cost in this current time is secondary. It's about, how do I get my product on the shelf? How am I getting, the work done? Rather than what does it cost me? Because the pressure from the business is as hard as ever to deliver.
It's a risk. It's a different type of risk. How do I fulfill my customer's demand?
Exactly.
I can't fill my shift, right? And it does change the paradigms considerably.
Yeah, I save $10 on a person, but then I lose $30 in revenue, right?
Yeah, if you think about a little tactical example of how that value has shifted. So 3 years ago, when direct sourcing sort of first started getting into the lexicon, major play was cost saving. Direct sourcing, go direct, payroll, cut out the staff, all that business. Companies don't care about that anymore. Your exact point, Karen. It's like, no, I want to use direct sourcing to get to this different talent pool that my staffing companies can't get to, because it's all about getting the people in. So it's interesting, the same service, but the value prop of it has totally shifted.
Not the least of which is when we talk about savings, we're still talking about a percentage difference against on that given role. There's no one talking about what if you found one superstar that can do the work of two. Like no one's metrics has started to deal with that part yet, and that's how managers think. That's the reality of the situation. So that's why I'm excited to remeasure this whole lot based on something that's much higher value than just trying to tease potential savings.
And Jason, are you guys doing anything around, I one of the questions I always get in RFP is, what are you doing to educate your population, right? How much are we spending on contractors to sort of get them the next skill? And I've always replied back and said, we have that service available, but it'd be more useful if I said, let's say Jason is a stellar performer, his tenure limit has not been reached, and the next job requires him to have one extra skill. And so the commitment on both sides, and you have like Beeline or a system sort of figure this out, is if I'm missing Visio and everything else I've already been trained with in the company, if I spend 8 weeks before the next project with the commitment from the buyer and the supplier that we're going to put them in the Visio training class and we're going to use it right away, then that skill actually gets learned and adopted. Is there anything like that you guys are seeing within contingent labor to hold on to talent and retain it?
The last I saw that in a formal, like organized basis, unfortunately, was long ago, like 10 years ago, where there would be, and it would fall under the auspices of apprenticeship programs. And sometimes it would be more than one hiring or buying company saying that we're going to consciously do this. We need to increase the skills in this set, and we will consciously bring people in that don't yet have it, allow them some time to have it. And that's the only way I've actually seen it work. Your idea that you can sort of democratize it one transaction at a time. And I don't know that the patience would be there as folks are trying to fill roles, but I love the idea.
Yeah. But you know what we could do, and this is, I've lamented this for years. I don't understand why the industry is waiting to the last second and then give it to the MSPs to approve it and then to the staffing firms, right? Like we should look at hot skills specific to geographies and companies' needs, and then say, all right, MSPs, here's the 4 or 5 skills for this type of job title or even geography that I'm looking for. Share it. Like give them the 6 to 12 months, right? Like let's open up the kimono to the staffing agencies and give them a heads up so that, okay, maybe you're not going to get the fill necessarily today, but you will down the road if you choose to invest in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This notion of transparency, I think,
the
can serve us all.
doesn't have to be 100%. I think,
right.
I think many would be very happy with an 80% forecast, even a 50% forecast.
I'd be happy with 30% forecast.
I'd be happy with the forecast.
There you go.
I'd just be happy with the
Don't
forecast.
assume that all clients are. Don't assume that they're just not sharing it with you. Most often, those forecasts aren't really being done, or at least
Yeah.
Exactly.
not comprehensively.
Yeah, they can't share it because it doesn't exist, but
Yeah.
wow,
Exactly.
it did. To round out your question, Ashish, I'll just say that we've seen a ton of investment in recruit, train, deploy initiatives over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's been very focused on the front end, getting them in the door, not in pivoting them to the next opportunity once they've completed the project. So it's an interesting concept. I do have to agree with Jason, probably difficult to manage on a one-to-one basis. But huge value to cracking that code.
Yeah, I think Beeline could do it.
We did, but I didn't want to divulge that today. I'm waiting for SIA.
I mean, literally, Brian, if you think about it, it's just taking job description A, person's resume, match the two, and say what's missing in the differential of both on site, and just say, oh, that skill's missing. Let's automate that. And
I think about it too from an attraction perspective. We just talked about the amount of competition out there. So how do you differentiate yourself against competitors for resources? So if you're not only able to offer a role, but a developmental opportunity that promotes the next role, that becomes very compelling when we're trying to separate and elevate our opportunities.
Yeah. Bruce, you're very quiet on this topic.
No, I think it's just sometimes my job title used to be head of innovation, and I come as a head of frustration because we all know these good ideas, but 5% of them stick. And I get frustrated. Many times I take this idea to clients. They're like, "Yeah, great, but can we just fill all these jobs really quickly and then we can get to it? Then we can get. I need to get to it."
Yeah.
The University of Phoenix they had this spin-off called Balloon.com 10 years ago. They did exactly this. They put millions and millions into it and ran out of money before any client would buy it. Because every client said, yeah, great idea. You invest, you build, and you bring it to me, and then they just wouldn't buy it. Because the manager said, well, I want somebody that's got 2 years experience of Visio, not just been taught it. And that's the challenge we have.
Yeah.
And
But
Visio
Bruce,
is an
maybe-
easy one. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I was just going to say, Bruce, I was really enjoying where you were talking about this future structure of workforce. I don't know what the heck you call it, but it's not HR. It's not right. And I think only then will people start to look a little less myopically. And I don't mean that disparaging. To your point, we have day jobs. And I just want to get this guy or gal with the skills. But until we can start looking at it that way, and then we can start to incorporate some programs like we're articulating here.
Yeah, and we're starting to have, the new kid in town that we've sort of never seen before is the CFO, who are now getting involved in conversations around this, if you can get to the right level. Because ultimately, they're the ones that, somebody's going to with a, asking for a budget for next year, bottom right-hand corner, and they say, well, go away and you must do better. A bit like a school teacher, right? Try harder. And now they're getting more and more involved and say, well, let me help you. Let's think, is there a different way of getting this work done? Can we look at this through a different lens? Do we have to do it the way we've always done it? Can we take advantage of this extended workforce strategy and so on? So I think that is a real thing. And I think the more people we can get involved in those conversations, instead of just procurement and HR, CFO, even marketing, the brand is becoming more and more important than ever to attract people to an organization. So
that's a good point.
Those are the conversations that we're trying to stir up, but very early days.
Jason, I think I cut you off. So
No, so the only thing I would add is, I think those who have experimented in this area, whether it's entry level engineers, so trying to bring folks in, it's always come down to the same type of issue. Folks want to not take a risk on their talent. And I think that's the difference, is who's going to take the risk of this person not really being capable or capable enough in time as they ramp, especially in technical roles when the time of that ramp is so much of the value equation of a contingent worker really working out. So in the old theory, we would say staffing companies would take that risk on. This is their inventory. They're appreciating their inventory. But I don't think that's necessarily practical either. So Ashish, we have to figure out between the candidate and that manager who needs it most and feels that need most directly, one of those are most likely to have to take the risk on whether or not that works.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think to scale it, you definitely have to have the company take on part of that responsibility. Well, this has been great. I wanted to end this with two things. One is there anything that is important that you think we forgot to talk about? And then number two is, what is the one thing you're really looking forward to a post Mu and Delta economy?
I'll kick off. Last time I said hugging, and now because of Delta, I think less hugging. Hugging got back, and now it's maybe dial it back a little bit again, and then we'll come back to hugging.
That's funny, Jason. I actually was on Teresa from Talent Wave asked the same one a while ago. My answer was hugging, and I actually came under quite a bit of fire for being too touchy-feely. So it's nice to know I'm not completely alone. I'm still going to hug. I'm just going to have a hazmat suit on. So I'm.
Yeah, I'll just admit it. I miss the hugging. So I miss having a good beer and going out and socializing. I mean, that's what I look forward to.
I hope this isn't too forward, but we both live in Jacksonville.
I know.
I'm a giver. So I just throw it out there.
I'd start with lunch, Doug. Go there.
And the hazmat suit. Totally platonic hazmat suit, but I'm here.
I know. Well, I'm too shy to ask you to lunch, Doug.
I'll DM you after this.
I'll say maybe I'm not quite as generous as Doug, but I'm happy to just shake hands rather than do a fist bump or elbow bump.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm at CWS and Gig Economy next week, so it's going to be really interesting to see. My prediction is 6 p.m. people will be fist bumping, 10 p.m. they'll be hugging. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, Bruce, I will see you at 10 p.m., my friend.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the things I miss is the interaction at conferences and the social piece of it, which we have not done for a long time. All right, guys. Well, this is really inspiring, and we'll definitely do this again next quarter. I think it's really helpful and educational. I hope everyone got something out of this.
Always enjoy it. Thanks for being the host with the most.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Right.
thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
You're here.
Everyone.
Thanks, all.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.